said she'd visit next week, but 10 years have passed. Tell me, how long does a mother wait before hope becomes heartbreak? I still remember the sound of her car that day, the hum of the engine fading down the dusty road, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume, something floral, something too young for me to name. The gravel crunched under her tires, and I waved until I couldn't see the red tail lights anymore. That was the last time my daughter Marilyn came home. Every Sunday since then, I've prepared coffee for two. I still make it the way she liked, extra sugar, no cream, just the way she'd smile and say, "Mom, you make it taste better than the cafe." Sometimes I even set her favorite cup at the table. It's the one with the chip on the handle, the one she painted herself at that pottery class when she was 15. I keep telling myself that if I keep doing these little things, she'll walk through the door and laugh at my stubbornness. But time has a cruel way of making fools out of mothers who wait. The old clock above the stove ticks slower now, or maybe I just hear it louder. The silence between each tick feels heavier these days. My house still smells faintly of cedar and old quilts. Her room, I never changed it. The posters on the wall, the books left open on the desk, even the broken hairbrush with a few strands of her hair tangled in the bristles. It's all there, untouched, like a museum of someone who promised to come back. People say I should move on. Eleanor, she's busy, she has her own life now. That's what Mrs. Crowley told me when she stopped by with pie last winter. She meant well, but I could see the pity in her eyes, the way she looked around the room and saw 2 coffee cups instead of 1, like I was keeping ghosts company. But Marilyn isn't a ghost. She's my daughter, my only child, the one I carried through winter storms and raised on stories and lullabies and love that stretched through hunger and loneliness. How can I move on from the person I built my life around? The phone rings sometimes. I always run for it, heart pounding, hoping it's her. But it's never her, just telemarketers or the church or some neighbor calling to check in. Each time I hang up, I whisper her name under my breath. Marilyn, like maybe she'll feel it wherever she is. Sometimes, when the wind is soft, I sit on the porch with my knitting and imagine she's walking up the path. I imagine her hair loose, sunlight catching in it, her smile the same as when she was little and ran to me with scraped knees. I'd say, "You're home," and she'd say, "I told you I'd come back, Mama." But that's just my heart talking. My mind knows better. Last spring I got a letter, not from Marilyn, from her husband Ryan. It was short, polite, almost cold. He said she was doing well, that she was busy with work, that she might not be able to visit any time soon. He thanked me for understanding. Understanding what, I wondered? That my daughter no longer had space for her mother in her new polished life, that her memories of home were just inconvenient. When Thomas, my husband, was alive, he'd tell me not to worry so much. "She's got your strength, Ellie. She'll find her way back." But Thomas has been gone 12 years now, and Marilyn hasn't come back once since his funeral. She didn't even help scatter his ashes by the lake like she promised. She just sent flowers, beautiful white lilies, cold and scentless. I still drive to that lake sometimes. I sit on the same rock where Thomas and I used to fish and watch the water shimmer like it's keeping secrets. I whisper to him, tell him how our girl is doing, even though I don't really know. I tell him about the letter, about the silence that grows thicker every year. I tell him I still wait. Maybe he can hear me. Maybe he's waiting too. Tell me, would you keep waiting if the person you loved most forgot you existed? Would you keep the coffee warm and the door unlocked, just in case they came home? I sat at my kitchen table that morning, the light creeping in slow and pale through the thin curtains, the same way it had for 40 years. My coffee had gone cold long before I remembered to drink it. My fingers were stiff from the night before, from clutching the edge of the counter after Marilyn's words cut through me. Thief. That word still hung in my ears like a curse I didn't earn. I wanted to believe I'd misheard her, that perhaps she meant something else, something softer. But her eyes had said everything. Eyes don't lie, not when they belong to someone you once cradled in your arms. I kept replaying it all, the tone in her voice, the tremor in her lip, the way she looked at me like a stranger. It wasn't the accusation that hurt the most. It was the distance it revealed. Somewhere between the years of raising her mother, babysitting her, and sending her graduation card with trembling hands, the bridge between us had quietly collapsed, and I hadn't noticed until I stood there amid the ruins. The ring she spoke of had been her grandmother's, my dearest friend, Evelyn's ring. She'd given it to me one summer afternoon, long before she fell ill. We were sitting under her big oak tree, the same one that dropped acorns all over the yard every fall. She'd said, "If anything ever happens to me, Clara, you keep it safe. Don't let it get lost." She'd laughed after saying it, brushing it off, but I never forgot. When she passed, I couldn't bring myself to wear it. I kept it in the little porcelain box she'd given me for my 60th birthday, with blue violets painted on the lid, because she said violets always reminded her of patience. That box sat in my dresser drawer, untouched, until the day I found it gone. It had been a week earlier. I remember because it was a Tuesday, laundry day. I'd gone to put away a few folded shirts, and when I opened the drawer, the box wasn't there. For a moment, I thought I'd misplaced it. I checked under the folded clothes, under the scarves, even under the drawer liner. Nothing. The porcelain box and the ring inside it had vanished. I'd sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. It wasn't about the ring's worth. God knows I'd never cared for jewelry much. It was the memory inside it. Losing that ring felt like losing Evelyn all over again. And then yesterday, when Marilyn came over, I thought maybe she'd found it. Maybe she'd come to bring it back, smiling, saying, "Oh, Clara, I found something that belonged to you." But instead she stood at my doorway, arms crossed, her voice shaking with anger, saying, "You had no right to take that ring." I remember blinking, thinking I'd misheard her. I told her it had been given to me. She didn't believe me. She said her mother never mentioned anything about that. She said I'd stolen it from Evelyn's estate years ago. And when I tried to explain, when I tried to remind her of the summers she'd spent in my house, the times I'd rocked her to sleep when her mom was sick, she only looked at me with pity, like I was a lonely old woman telling stories to justify her own sins. I didn't cry then. I was too stunned to. But the tears came later, when the house went quiet, when the clock in the hallway ticked too loud. I thought of calling someone, maybe my son or one of the church ladies, but pride held me back. What would I even say? That a child I'd loved like my own had accused me of theft? That she'd spat on a memory sacred to me? No, that kind of pain isn't something you pass around. It's the kind that sits heavy in your chest until it becomes part of your breathing. That evening, I walked to Evelyn's old house. I hadn't been there in years. The front porch sagged now, and the paint had peeled into thin curls. The swing where we used to sit was gone. I peeked through the front window. It was empty inside, hollow, like my heart. For a moment, I could almost see Evelyn there again, wearing her garden apron, humming something soft as she set a pie on the sill to cool. "We'll be old one day," she used to say, "and all we'll have left are the stories people tell about us." I wonder what stories they tell about me now. When I came home, the porch light flickered. It had been doing that for weeks, but I hadn't bothered to fix it. I sat down on the porch steps, feeling the cool night air against my skin. Somewhere down the street, kids were laughing, their voices sharp and full of life. It sounded like a world I no longer belonged to. I looked up at the sky. It was clear, not a cloud in sight. The stars reminded me of the night Evelyn and I had buried a little tin box in her garden. Inside it, we'd put a note each. Hers said, "For tomorrow." Mine said, "For when I miss you." We'd laughed about digging it up someday, but we never did. I wonder if Marilyn ever knew about that box. Later that night, I sat at my sewing table. My hands trembled as I unfolded an old letter, one Evelyn had written me a few months before she passed. The ink had faded, but her words hadn't. "If life ever separates us, don't let guilt or pride keep love buried. You've always been my truest friend, Clara." I read it again and again until the tears blurred the paper. Marilyn might not believe me, but Evelyn did, and somehow that had to be enough. I closed the letter, pressed it to my chest, and whispered, "I kept it safe, Evie. I really did." But in that moment I wondered, maybe I hadn't kept it safe enough. Maybe love, when left unspoken too long, turns brittle like old paper. Maybe what we think we're protecting is already fading, one memory at a time. And yet I couldn't hate Marilyn. Not truly. She was her mother's child, stubborn, proud, carrying all that unspoken grief inside. Perhaps in her eyes I was a relic of a past that hurt too much to face, but the truth still burned quietly in me, like the last ember of a dying fire. I didn't take that ring. I never would have. I only carried it because I couldn't bear to let Evelyn disappear completely. That night, I promised myself I'd find another way to prove it. Not for my pride, but for the friendship that once shaped my whole life. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, if someone refuses to believe the truth, do you still owe them peace? The next morning came with a drizzle, soft and steady, like the sky itself couldn't hold its sorrow. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my armchair, the one by the window, watching the streetlights blur through the rain. My fingers traced the armrest, the old fabric fraying under the weight of years, and I thought, maybe some things simply wear out, not from use, but from silence. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit in my house like a ghost waiting for the world to forget me. I had to talk to Marilyn again, to make her see, really see, that what she believed wasn't the truth. So I put on my gray sweater, the one Thomas always said made me look soft as winter, and I tucked Evelyn's old letter into my purse. Proof didn't mean much to youth anymore, but maybe words written by her mother's own hand could reach where mine couldn't. Her house was across town, a neat modern one with pale blue shutters and a little fenced garden full of flowers that bloomed too perfectly to be real. I stood outside her gate for a while, holding on to the iron latch, my heart hammering like it hadn't in years. When I finally knocked, it was Ryan who opened the door. He looked surprised to see me. "Oh, Mrs. Whitfield," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. She's in the kitchen. Come in." His voice carried that uneasy kindness people use when they're caught between two sides of a storm. I thanked him and stepped inside. The air smelled like cinnamon and coffee, and there were wedding pictures on the wall, Marilyn and Ryan laughing, Evelyn's smile framed beside them. That photograph caught my eye. Evelyn's hand rested on her daughter's shoulder in that picture, and for a moment I saw her looking right through the glass, as if she were silently asking me to fix what was broken. Marilyn came out from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. When her eyes met mine, her face froze. "Clara, what are you doing here?" Her tone wasn't cruel, just tired, but that hurt too, the kind of tired that sounds like you've given up on someone. "I came to talk," I said softly. "You accused me of something last night that wasn't true. I need you to hear me." She sighed and leaned against the counter. Clara, please. I don't want to fight. I found the old jewelry inventory from Mom's estate. The ring was listed, and it wasn't given to anyone. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folded letter. My hands trembled, not from age this time, but from the weight of what I was about to reopen. Then maybe you should read this. It's from your mother. She gave it to me a few months before she passed. She wanted me to keep her ring safe. Marilyn hesitated, her lips tightening, but she took the letter. Her eyes scanned the paper, and I watched her face, waiting, praying for a flicker of recognition, of belief. When she reached the end, her jaw clenched. She set it down on the counter and said quietly, "That doesn't prove anything. It doesn't even mention the ring." I felt something inside me crumble. "Marilyn," I whispered. She trusted me. That ring wasn't gold to her. It was memory. The night before she died, she asked me to wear it once, so she'd know someone she loved would carry her story. Her eyes filled, but her voice hardened. "Then why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you tell me all these years?" "Because grief is quiet," I said, "and some promises don't need an audience." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding," he said gently, trying to bridge the space between us. "Maybe the box got misplaced, or—" "It wasn't misplaced," Marilyn interrupted, her tone cracking. "Mom's ring was in that estate inventory, and I looked in the photo albums. She's wearing it in pictures from right before she passed. There's no mention of giving it away." Her words struck me like wind against an old window, shaking but not breaking. I steadied myself against the counter, breathing shallowly. Maybe she didn't write it down because she thought her daughter would remember her heart, not her paperwork. For a moment, silence filled the room. The rain outside had turned heavier, pattering against the kitchen windows like fingers drumming impatience. I looked around the space. Everything gleamed, spotless, organized. The kind of home that didn't leave room for ghosts. I didn't belong here. "I only came," I whispered, "to remind you that love doesn't vanish with proof. I don't expect forgiveness, but I won't wear shame that isn't mine." Marilyn's eyes glistened, but her mouth stayed firm. "Clara, maybe you should go." Something inside me broke quietly, not loud like glass, but soft like paper tearing. I nodded, picked up my purse, and turned to leave. As I reached the door, I felt Ryan's hand touch my arm lightly. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, his voice low, "I believe you." I looked up at him, kind eyes, unsure but honest, and nodded. "Thank you, son. Sometimes belief is the only thing left we can give." I walked home through the rain, my shoes soaked through, the cold biting at my skin, but I didn't hurry. The world blurred around me, soft and gray, and I felt the years pressing on me heavier than ever. When I reached my porch, I paused. The flickering light bulb buzzed faintly above the door. I almost laughed. It hadn't burned out yet. Neither had I. Inside, the house felt even emptier than before. I hung my coat, poured a cup of tea I didn't drink, and sat down in the quiet. The letter still lay folded in my purse. I thought of Evelyn, her laugh, her stories, the way she used to say, "We'll always find each other, Clara, even when the world forgets." Maybe Marilyn didn't remember. Maybe time had buried her mother's words too deep. But I did, and that had to mean something. That night, I lit a candle beside Evelyn's photograph. The flame trembled at first, then steadied like it was learning how to stay alive again. I watched it burn and whispered, "You'd tell her the truth if you could, wouldn't you, Evie? You'd tell her who I really was." A small smile tugged at my lips through the tears. Maybe she was telling her in her own way. Maybe every flicker of that flame was her voice, soft and unseen. Still, the ache in my chest wouldn't leave. It wasn't just about the ring. It was about something larger, something sacred, the bond between two women who'd weathered life side by side, reduced to a misunderstanding that no one cared to mend. I leaned back, the chair creaking beneath me, and closed my eyes. Somewhere in the dark I could almost hear Evelyn's voice. Don't chase proof, Clara. Chase peace. But how do you find peace when the person who matters most won't see your truth? If your memories are called lies, do you protect your heart or fight to prove it was real? It had been 3 days since I last saw Marilyn. The rain had passed, leaving the air cool and clean, but my house still smelled faintly of damp wood and loneliness. I'd stopped expecting her to call. Even when the phone rang, I didn't reach for it anymore. It was never her. I spent my mornings in the garden, what was left of it anyway. The marigolds had survived the season, stubborn as I was. I'd talk to them while I watered, telling them how Thomas once said I had a green heart. He used to laugh when I'd sing to the flowers, saying they bloomed just to hear me. Funny, isn't it? How memories become the only audience that listens without judgment. On the 4th evening, just as the sun was bleeding into the horizon, I heard footsteps on my porch. They were light, uncertain. For a second, I thought it was Ryan again. Maybe he'd come to bring me peace where his wife could not. But when I opened the door, it was Marilyn. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of something unseen had bent her shoulders. Her hair was pulled back messily, and her eyes, oh, her eyes were red from crying. "Marilyn," I whispered. She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, clutching a small velvet box in her hands, the one I hadn't seen in years. "I found it," she said softly. Her voice cracked on the second word, and before I could even speak, she opened the box. Inside, nestled in faded white silk, was the ring. Evelyn's ring. The same gold band Thomas had slipped on her finger when she was young. The same one she'd handed to me that quiet night when the stars looked too heavy to count. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My knees went weak, and I gripped the edge of the door frame to steady myself. Where did you... "It was in Mom's old sewing cabinet," she said. "The bottom drawer, taped behind the panel. Ryan was fixing it, and he found a small envelope. It had your name on it." She handed me the envelope. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single folded note, yellowed with time. The ink faded, but still legible. Evelyn's handwriting. "Clara, if you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to tell them myself. I want Marilyn to have my ring one day, but I trust you to hold it until she's ready. Not for its worth, but for its meaning. You'll know when it's time." My lips quivered as I traced the words. The same neat looping letters I'd seen on recipe cards, on Christmas notes, on every kindness that woman ever sent my way. I could almost hear her voice in the words, steady, warm, certain. When I looked up, Marilyn was crying, silent tears sliding down her cheeks, like the kind that come only when you've been wrong for far too long. "I'm so sorry, Clara," she whispered. "I didn't believe you. I thought..." Her voice broke. "I thought you wanted to keep it for yourself. I thought..." I shook my head, reaching out to touch her arm. "You thought what any daughter would, that you were protecting your mother's memory. I can't blame you for that." She covered her mouth and sobbed, harder this time. "I said such awful things to you. I called you a thief. I told Ryan you were jealous of us. I stopped her gently. "Shh, it's all right, child. Grief makes us blind. We look for villains when the real thief is time." She looked at me through her tears. "You still call me child, after everything." I smiled faintly. "You'll always be Evelyn's girl, and she loved you too much for me to stop." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the old clock ticking behind me, slow, patient, like it was holding its breath. Finally, Marilyn stepped closer. "I came to bring this back," she said, holding out the box, but I pushed it gently back into her hands. "No, sweetheart, it's yours. Your mother wanted you to have it when you were ready, and now you are." She shook her head fiercely. "No, I can't. You kept her promise when I couldn't even remember it. You should have it." The warmth of her hand against mine was enough to break the last wall between us. I wrapped my frail fingers around hers, both of us trembling. "Listen to me, Marilyn," I said quietly. "A ring is a circle, no beginning, no end. It doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to the love that made it, and that love will always connect us." She let out a shaky laugh through her tears. "You talk like Mom did, always making sense out of pain." I chuckled softly. "That's how we survive, dear. We turn hurt into meaning, or we let it eat us alive." Her eyes met mine then, full of something I hadn't seen in years, understanding. "Can you ever forgive me?" she asked. I smiled sadly. "Oh, child, forgiveness isn't something you give once. It's something you live with. I forgave you the moment you walked away." She threw her arms around me then, a sudden desperate hug that smelled of rain and lavender shampoo. I held her close, feeling the fragile beat of her heart against mine. In that embrace I could feel Evelyn too. The years between us folded like pages in a book, and for the first time in so long I didn't feel old. I just felt human. When she pulled away, her tears had stopped. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving only the soft hum of crickets outside. She slipped the ring onto her finger, and for a fleeting second I could have sworn I saw Evelyn's smile in her reflection on the glass. Marilyn wiped her cheeks. "Will you come over for dinner tomorrow?" she asked. "Ryan's making roast chicken, your favorite." I laughed lightly. "I'd like that. It's been a while since someone cooked for me." She smiled, hesitating before saying, "You'll always have a place at my table, Clara, I promise." When the door closed behind her that evening, I stayed by the window for a long while, watching her car disappear into the dusk. The ring glimmered faintly on her hand through the windshield, a small golden echo of everything Evelyn and I had tried to preserve. The house felt warmer that night, not because of the candlelight or the fire I lit, but because forgiveness had finally found its way home. Still, as I sat there with Evelyn's letter resting beside my teacup, I couldn't help but wonder, when the truth finally clears the fog, do we really see better, or do we just learn to live with the blur? That night I couldn't sleep, not because of the ache in my bones, though it was there, whispering in every joint, but because my heart wouldn't stay quiet. It kept replaying every moment, every word, every silence that had stretched too long between Marilyn and me. The house was still, the kind of stillness that makes you hear your own breathing. I sat by the fireplace with Evelyn's letter in my lap, tracing each curve of her handwriting with my finger. It felt like touching her hand again after all these years. Thomas used to tease me for being sentimental. "You hold on to things like they're alive," he'd say. I suppose he was right. Maybe I was afraid that if I let go, the memories would fade too, and then what would be left of me? I glanced toward the small box of ashes that sat on the mantel. Thomas's name was engraved on it. He'd been gone 20 years, and yet some nights I still turned over in bed expecting to find him beside me. The ring had been his gift to Evelyn, but when she passed it to me, she said, "Keep it safe, Clara. You'll know when it's time." I smiled through the tears. She'd been right. Marilyn's visit had stirred something in me, a quiet peace I hadn't felt in years. For so long I'd let anger and misunderstanding poison the air between us. I had told myself it didn't matter, that the younger generation was different now, busier, colder, chasing dreams made of screens and paychecks. But it did matter. Because love doesn't vanish when people forget its language. It just waits for someone to remember. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the window, painting gold across the old wallpaper. I made myself tea and sat on the porch, the way Thomas and I used to. I could still see the faint marks on the railing where he'd carved our initials, back when we thought forever was something we could hold. My neighbor, little Benny, waved from across the fence. "Morning, Miss Clara," he shouted, holding a bunch of wildflowers. "Mama says these are for you." I smiled so wide it hurt. "Tell your mama I said thank you." He grinned and ran off, leaving a trail of laughter behind him. Children have that magic. They remind you that love doesn't die, it just changes faces. Later that day, Marilyn called. Her voice was lighter, softer. "I'm making that roast chicken tonight," she said. "And Ryan picked up your favorite pie. Can you come by around 6?" I paused, just to let the words sink in. The invitation felt like sunlight after years of winter. "Of course," I said, pretending to sound casual, even though my heart was fluttering like a girl's. When I arrived, her house smelled of rosemary and baked apples, the same scent that used to fill mine when Evelyn and I cooked side by side. Marilyn greeted me at the door, apron on, her hair tied back. She looked radiant, like a reflection of her mother in her best years. Come in," she said, almost nervously. "Ryan's just finishing the potatoes." Ryan turned from the stove with a smile. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said warmly, "you're finally here. We've been waiting." For a moment I stood there, taking it all in. The laughter, the warmth, the sound of clinking dishes, the simple peace of belonging. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed this until now. Marilyn came to the table carrying a small velvet box, the same one. She placed it in the center like a centerpiece of forgiveness. "I want this to stay here," she said softly, "in our home, as a reminder of Mom, of you, of what we almost lost." I nodded, tears pooling in my eyes. "Then let it remind us that love doesn't break when people do. It just waits to be remembered." Dinner was full of laughter and stories, the kind that made the walls feel alive again. When Ryan poured the tea, he accidentally spilled some, and Marilyn scolded him in the exact same tone Evelyn once used with Thomas. It made me laugh, that deep, shaking laugh that carries both sorrow and joy. After dinner, Marilyn brought out an old photo album. "Mom kept these," she said. "I found them in a box I thought maybe you'd want to see." We flipped through the pages together, faded photographs of picnics, birthdays, the lake house summers. There was one picture of Evelyn holding Marilyn as a baby, me standing behind them, hand on her shoulder. My heart caught in my throat. "She looked so happy," I whispered. "She was," Marilyn said softly. "And I think she'd want us to be too." I nodded, closing the album carefully. "Then let's make her proud." Before I left that night, Marilyn walked me to the porch. The air was cool, the stars scattered like dust across the sky. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly, "for still loving me after everything." I smiled faintly, looking up at the stars. "You thank me by living kinder than yesterday. That's all any mother ever wants." We stood there in silence for a while, both looking at the night sky, and for the first time in years I felt whole again. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, but because love had survived, even if bruised. When I came home, I placed Evelyn's letter back in its box and lit a candle beside it. The flame flickered softly, and I whispered into the quiet, "She's all right now, Evelyn. You'd be proud." As I sat in my chair, wrapped in Thomas's old blanket, I thought about how fragile the threads of family are, how easily they tangle, how long it takes to untie them. And maybe that's what life really is, not about holding on to what's perfect, but forgiving what isn't. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it with someone who still treasures what can't be replaced. And don't forget to subscribe our channel, Beloved Grandma, where every memory has a heartbeat.